There are people throughout the world that have interesting stories to tell. Stories of heroism, acts of kindness, near-death experiences, successes, and failures. You usually hear of these stories from people that live in another state or country. But what about the stories from within your own community? Everyone has a story to tell. And by everyone, we mean your neighbor, your coworker, the person behind you at church, people you interact with on a daily basis, or maybe even you.
Welcome to the DTB Podcast, presented by the Bless Your Heart Nonprofit Corporation. I'm Brennan Mathern, and I'll be your host as we speak to some of the most interesting people in Bayou Lafourche. You know, modern-day podcasts started in 2004, but prior to broadband internet and devices like iPods and iPhones, podcasts were actually previously known as audio blogs, and their roots date back to the 1980s. And of course, radio precedes all of that, with podcasts being the evolution, an on-demand radio of sorts. But in 2022, we still see a market for traditional AM and FM radio, even with on-demand programming. Same can be said for streaming services and cable, as well as digital news and traditional newspapers. And that brings us to this episode. The Lafourche Gazette has been covering local news for over 50 years. In an industry that seems dominated by a number of clicks, tabloid news, and yes, even fake news, they have managed to remain steadfast in their endeavor to cover our local area. Whether it's political events, school sports, or local fairs and festivals, their staff members are there to capture those moments and share with the community that still seems to have the longing for reaching for a newspaper with their morning coffee. In this episode, we'll cover the history of the Lafourche Gazette, their current status, especially post-Hurricane Ida, and how a newspaper manages to survive in a digital landscape. And we'll look forward to the future of the publication as well. Joining us today is the owner and publisher, Addie Melisson, and editor, Casey Gisclair. Addie and Casey, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. So we're going to start like we do every episode. Tell us, who's your mom and dad? Where'd you grow up? Tell us a little bit about your family.
So I actually grew up in La Rose. I've never moved out of La Rose. So my parents are Barbara and Panky Christian. My dad is actually from Leeville. My mom's from La Rose, or you would say Delta Farm. So, yes.
Yeah, I'm the son of Steve and Kathy. We lived in East 115th Street in Galliano, which is exactly across from Galliano Elementary School. I know that because we used to joke that we'd throw a football to school one day. That obviously never happened. And then moved to Cutoff later in life. Just been living here my whole life.
So before we get into the history, let's talk about the current status of the newspaper. Tell us about your current staff. Tell us about where you're currently located, because we know that you guys have been in a building in La Rose forever, but you have a different home right now.
Yes, so after the storm, we lost our building, and we moved to Raceland on Highway 90, about 5 minutes once you get onto 90 going towards New Orleans. I actually really like it there. I know some of my other employees really like it there because we're like centrally located. And lately we've become much more popular in Thibodaux, and I'm in Thibodaux a lot more. So for me, it's great. I really like being in Raceland. But yeah, so we have my daughter just recently joined the staff. I have a couple of people in the office, but it's all local people. And whenever you come upon the Gazette, our employees have been there for so long. Our editor left after the storm. She had been there for 49 years. My manager in the office, she has been there since she graduated high school. So they just seem to stay. It's like we're a little family there.
And speaking of family, that's how we can track it. The Lafourche Gazette got its start in 1965. So Addie, this has always been a family business, if you will, and you're just the latest one to inherit it. But let's go back to the original paper and the original owners and talk about how the paper got started.
So my daughter's grandfather started in 65, and it started out in Golden Meadow, and then they moved their office to La Rose, and it just started by just real small. They started, I think their first year was around 7,000 papers were published. It was published twice a week, and it just grew over the years. And I believe it was 2005, Boo and I bought it from his dad, and then I inherited in 2015. And so we've managed to keep it going. I would say about 2018, I kind of was at a point where, with social media and all of that, I didn't know how it was going to work out. And then I had somebody that kept knocking at the door that wanted to join the staff. And so I'm like, okay, well, we'll have Casey come in, and we created a new website, and that really brought us more popularity. Actually, the storm really helped us. I think what happened was we stopped printing, and then you know how it is, when something's taken away from you, you're like, hey, wait, I really missed that. And so once we started publishing, our papers don't stay on the stands now. So for something that I thought was going to go away, it actually, in a way, just, became more desirable.
And it started as reading online. It started as called the Greater Lafourche Gazette, and like you mentioned, around 7,000 copies. Obviously in black and white when it first started, and eventually got into color. But Earl Lejean Sr. was the original owner, and again, that for a long time, many years, held up the Lafourche Gazette. And y'all have had a lot of, when I look through all of my, belongings from when I was a child, we see press clippings, so all the way back then, even then, as you are now, you guys were covering local events, you were publishing, things that other papers, it just seems ridiculous now. Why would you publish lists of high school students and pictures of little league teams and things like that? But those are things that people can treasure forever.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. At the office, we were lucky because they survived the storm, but we have every year since the paper was published bound it in a book. So on Mondays, it's my job to go through it, choose a book, choose a date, and do back in the day. And I just get caught up. I can't tell. Casey and I will be sitting down and we're talking about whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this. And before you know it, it's an hour taking me just to take pictures of one date. But there's just so much to look back at. When you have that many years, from 65, we have every book. So.
And Casey, you, we obviously know anyone who's followed you and listened to you. We know your history. Working for the LSU newspaper, then coming back and working for local media, not just one or two. Everybody knows you from the radio as well. But what was your draw, and was it some of these things that we're talking about that drew you to a passion to want to get into, get in business with the Lafourche Gazette?
I wanted to come home. I felt there was so much potential in this area that was being untapped. And you talked a minute ago about the different things that we do in listing the high school students. And I had a college professor once that said you're guaranteed to be in the newspaper twice, if you get arrested and when you die. And I always thought that doesn't make any sense. There's so much good going on. Why shouldn't that be recognized? So we try so hard. If somebody does something really well, we want to let the community know about that. If someone earns a scholarship or hits the game-winning home run, we want the community to know about that. And I had such a rich passion for, living here because this is the community that I know. The people here are my friends, in many cases, my relatives. This is just an area that I had such rich passion for. I wanted to come home. Spent my early career as a journalist in Houma. And we did some stuff down here, but it wasn't scratching the itch all the way. It just was, I wanted to come home.
Oftentimes people ask me, or comment how good of a job Casey does. And I tell him his heart's here. His heart's in Lafourche. And that's what, as good as he is as a writer, and his heart's here and his passion shows in his writing.
I definitely want to get back to that and what Casey brought to the table. But before we get too far removed from the history, I want to go back, as we talked about Earl Sr., and publishing for about 40 years before you and Boo took it over. Tell us a little bit about Boo. And I know people, when you think about Boo Lejean, a lot of people associate him and the Gazette for great reason, hand in hand. So let's talk a little bit about Boo.
So, even just 15 years ago, it was just so different. So every Thursday, he had his route. Every Thursday, he would start in Golden Meadow at 8:30. He'd have his little steno pad, and he had the messiest handwriting. He was so unprofessional, but everybody loved him, and he'd always get an ad out of everyone. So, yes, and I would say maybe about 10, 11 years ago, with social media coming out, I'm like, boo, like what, I don't know, like what the future has, for the paper. And he's like, what's wrong with you? You don't believe in me? Like, we could do this, I'm like, but do you really understand what Facebook is? But yes, he was just, I could just say so much, but everyone loved him, and he didn't know a stranger, and it didn't matter who you were, and it didn't matter how much money you had or anything. I used to say we would go to the fair, and the person that was bidding the most on the item for the auction, he knew him, and he took the time to talk with him. And the one walking around the rides with no shoes on, that was his buddy too. That's just who he was, and he was such a big part of it. So when it was left to me, I had a decision to make whether to keep it or keep going, but I just feel like it's something he left me, and it's something he left our girls, and I want Lafourche Parish to have this. I don't want this to go away. Lafourche Parish is a very traditional parish, and I think we have a long time that we're going to be able to keep this print paper going.
You mentioned you girls now being involved with the paper, and obviously you taking it over. And I guess that's where I wanted to touch on next. Was this a natural progression for you? Was this something that was in your wheelhouse, or this was something that you really had to learn about it? And what about your girls as well?
No. So, Boo passed away on a Friday, and 10 days later, I was working full-time. I knew absolutely nothing about the business. We had an amazing staff who just helped me along. They just got me to where I am today. It took some time. Going to do sales was so out my element. That was just the hardest thing for me. Still to this day, I'm not the best of it. I'll joke. I'm like, the weakest link in the paper is our salesperson, and it's me. But yeah, it's really taken some time for me to learn it. But now my heart's just in it, and I just want Lafourche Parish to continue to have the paper. My youngest daughter, Angèle, will be graduating in December in management, and so she has decided to come aboard, and she has some really big plans and add some more avenues and offer more services. So I'm excited about that. She recently took over our Instagram, and Casey and I is both like, okay, wait, we didn't even know how to do that. So she's interning with us this summer, and she's just bringing new, fresh ideas, because at the end of the day, we have a name, we have a reputation, and there's things and more services we can offer to help people promote their business.
Looking ahead, you mentioned that you guys had back when you and Boo were there, y'all started a website. The website has had a refreshing since Casey came on board. And Casey, you came in in 2020, right before everything hit the fan. And I think if you go back and look at our local Facebook feed and everybody else, all of a sudden, Casey Gisclair's name started popping up a little bit more, and Lafourche Gazette articles start popping up a little bit more. And it was, you mentioned, Addie, the hurricane doing well for the print side. But, man, on the digital side, I think you can point to COVID as a time where people started shifting and really started looking at y'all website.
No doubt. There's no doubt about that. And, it's so crazy is the way it happened is probably July-ish of 2019. I was trying to figure out, okay, what's next? Do I want to make this move? Started meeting with Addie and started planning this thing out. And I'll be honest, before making that final decision, I prayed about it and I said, do I really want to do this? I'd been at a place almost 10 years. Like, do I really want to make this move? And I was just told, like, okay, like, you're needed there. Like, you have to do, you're needed there. And then about 2 months into it, it all started to make sense as to where I was needed, because, then the world starts shutting down. And the coronavirus thing was so unique because, Brennan, you know this, you and I have worked through a lot of different things. And, there have been bird flus and different things that we've been told to worry about that we never really needed to worry about. But this one from the beginning felt different. And I remember one night I was making a spreadsheet, and I'm a numbers guy. I was just tracking numbers of how many cases around the world. And I'm looking at my computer clock, and it's like 3 a.m. And I'm like, man, if I'm this interested in this, then the people in the community are probably really interested in this too. So we just started sharing the stories and updating everything daily. And At the beginning, one of the big things was clearing up misinformation. And I think that we did a really good job of when there was misinformation out there, getting it out there and letting people know, and then sharing those numbers and letting people know, what was happening. Because, as you said earlier, there's fake news and there's real news. And I think one of the things that we did well was at a time when there was so much uncertainty, I think we told people like it was. For better or for worse, we told people like it was.
So, I can direct this question to both of you guys. So, in 2022, when the media seems to be at the forefront of nearly every discussion, especially political discussions, how has that affected your personal life? How has that affected you? And how are you able to be a neutral voice, seemingly presenting all the sides and letting people, try to understand the facts? How do you remain neutral in a world that seems so polarized?
We strive at staying neutral, and we're here to support our community, and we're not here to get the clicks. So there's a lot of stories that come our way that can really be taken off, but there's just too much negativity that follow it. And being a privately owned publication, we're not pressured by someone else to publish certain things. So
but Addie, negativity sells.
I mean,
know, that's what we all like. Is it that true? I mean, so how do you? How is it? And now that you say that, that's so interesting, because maybe that's one of the reasons people love the Gazette so much, is because it's not filled with all the negativity all the time. Even when y'all do have a mugshot on the front page, it's not the center story 90% of the time.
No.
I think that's exactly right, Brennan. I think that people understand that, while they could go other places and get the juice, so to speak, we're not that type of organization. We want to highlight the positive juice that's going on, the things that are happening in the community that are worth celebrating. There are stories to be celebrated here every day. There's people doing wonderful things here every single day. And we try to shine light on them. And look, it's funny you say that. I was speaking with some students at Lockport Lower for their career day a couple weeks ago, and a kid raised their hand and said, is it hard to write, bad things about people? And it was a little second grade. I thought it was a very mature question. I said, yeah, it is hard. And sometimes we do have to do those things, but we're not going to go out of our way to do those things, if that makes sense. It's part of the job, but we're not going to, go out of our way to do that.
Let's take a step back from news and talk about circulation for a minute. Obviously, this paper started as the Greater Lafourche Gazette, and it was meant for the South Lafourche area. How has that changed? I believe it was from Valentine all the way to Golden Meadow. So how has the circulation changed over the years, as well as your focus on what you cover?
So once I stepped in, once I really started paying attention more to what was going on in Thibodaux, I just feel like from the start I knew that we're the Lafourche Gazette. And when you think about 30 years ago, I feel like the parish has been so divided. But lately, I feel like the last 10 years, I feel like the parish has really come together. So I wanted to report more on the whole parish. But the way it worked was we delivered to every home south of Highway 90. So I would say maybe about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I started doing drop-offs north of Highway 90 in the Thibodaux area. And we just kept getting more requests for the paper. We kept our circulation the same. We were delivering not quite 16,000 papers a week. I would say maybe about, I don't know, were you here, Casey, whenever we stopped doing Sunday paper? Or we had
That was before me.
That was before you. So we used to publish twice a week. So I would say maybe about 4 years ago we let go our Sunday paper. But yeah, then after the storm, I just didn't think it was, we just couldn't deliver it to every home with all the destruction. So we cut back to 9,000 papers a week. And I think it's worked much better because, I know you would drive down a street and half the people wasn't picking up their paper. Now, if you want the paper, you're going to have to go grab you one. And we're getting asked to print more, but I just kind of think I like the idea. We run out. The paper's put out on Tuesday. If you want it, go run and grab you one. And, so as right now, I think I'll stay at 9,000. We may move up. We'll see where we at in a year and maybe print a few more. But I never thought I would come to the point that I'd be like, hey, wait, I have to get more printed. And that's kind of what the storm has caused to do.
And let's talk about the storm itself, and if y'all have any interesting stories. But obviously, in the immediate aftermath of the storm, there was no cell coverage. There was if you were evacuated, you had a way to follow what was going on through social media. I mean, obviously, but for the people that were here, it was very difficult to get any information. I know at the parish, working to get flyers put out to people, which seems so crazy in 2021, but that's what they were doing. And because we had to rely on those old school ways of getting the information out. So tell us about y'all experience with Hurricane Ida. Aside, we know the building, and y'all can kind of talk about that story as well, but about the paper and about the coverage.
So I stayed for the storm. I actually stayed on a houseboat right in front of our house in La Rose. But Casey had evacuated, so he was able to report and have internet, and I'll let him tell you about that.
Yeah, it was a unique experience because, after landfall, I'm like I said earlier, I'm a big numbers guy. I'm looking at views on the website right after landfall, everything plummeted, and I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, am I doing a poor job? Like, what's going on? Then reality sinks in. They don't have electricity. They don't have phone service. They have no way to read us. And that was what was so unique, is that I feel like in the beginning, I was sharing information to other people who were in Texas, or people that were in Lake Charles or in Baton Rouge, people who were evacuated and not yet gone back in. And it took a while. But one of the things that I have to say, and Brendan, you're part of this, man, we had a great team. Like, the sheriff's office helped us out tremendously. Parish government helped us out tremendously. And because of all those connections, the information got out. It was difficult to do. It was not an easy process, but we got it out. We made it work.
Yeah, I mean, Hurricane Ida was a tough situation, especially for any kind of media outlets, to try to communicate with people. And any of us who were in that business, we had to rely on some old school ways of doing things and kind of thinking outside the box. But that's also the time when people rely on information the most. And it's like I tell my colleagues, it's sort of the show, right? I mean, that's you train, you prepare for that moment where you have to be on your game, and people are relying on you to make life and death decisions potentially. Now I have to ask, Addie, you stayed on a house. I stayed behind too in Galliano at the Port Commission office, but that was a solid structure, even though the roof didn't survive, the Wi-Fi did. But I have to ask, what was it like on a houseboat experiencing this, even up in La Rose? It's not that far removed from Galliano.
So when we first bought the houseboat, I told my husband, I'm like, it is so ugly. Like, this houseboat from the outside is so ugly. He's like, Addie, you don't understand. This is all iron. Like, we can stay on this for a storm. We won't hear anything. And I was like, okay, and now I get it. So we were tied around. We had tugboats and barges all around us. When I talked to our neighbors, what they experienced, we hardly heard anything. My mom was cooking and the propane went out, and she's like, Lynn, I think we out of propane. And Lynn goes check, and he's like, Addie, don't tell her, but the tank's gone. He's like, the ice maker's gone, my boat lift's gone. But we can hardly hear anything. And we had taken my grandmother out of the nursing home, and we kept her with us. And even after the storm, no one had water, but we had water on our houseboat. It wasn't bad at all. I would do it again. I would stay again. Like, we hardly heard anything, and I think it's because it was just so solid. And now we did, when we woke up the next day, we didn't know. We ended up on the other side of the bayou, and we didn't even know that. But yeah, I would do it again. And then you just hear everybody's story, and have like Casey, who's doesn't really like the weather.
Terrified of bad weather. No, I will not. I will never be staying for any storms.
So it wasn't bad at all. But I think it's just the houseboat's all iron, and it's low, and yeah. So
I would never imagine wanting to stay on a houseboat for a storm, but the way that you paint that picture, I might not be. If it came to that, I might.
And if you kind of think, how they say if you stay on a tugboat or a supply boat, it's kind of like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about social media. And by the time Casey got to you guys in 2000, obviously everyone's on social media, as you point out. I mean, government agencies, everybody's on social media now. And frankly, people much to my chagrin, people actually get their news solely from social media now. Some people, some unfortunate souls, and but that has to change the way that you market the paper, that you market individual news stories. You now have to get on board with this, with your website, and now promoting individual stories through the Gazette, through individually, through Facebook, through Twitter, everything. How has, I guess, social media revolutionized what y'all are doing? You mentioned Instagram earlier. How does a newspaper promote itself through Instagram, where it's mostly pictures?
I mean, there's still a story. There's a story behind every picture, so it's just a link. You literally just copying and pasting a link from your Facebook to your Instagram to your Twitter, and it's the same thing that's in print. So,
man, I could tell you this. Facebook has been huge for the paper, and it's been huge for me personally. I mean, after COVID, the number of friend requests that I was getting per day from people that I didn't even know, adding me, and just because they wanted to see the updates every day. And then the same thing after Ida. And I tell people all of the time is every once in a while someone will, make a comment on a story or something, and someone will text me like, hey, did you see that? I was like, yeah, I don't even know who that is. But they're my Facebook friend because, half of my friends on there are complete strangers that just added me because they wanted to get the news. It's been game changing. People see me in the store. I have no clue who they are. Hey, good job on that story. I'm like, okay, but they're following us on social media.
When I first got my Facebook account years ago, I was explaining to Boo what it was, and he's like, listen to me. You do not decline nobody. Whoever asks to be your friend, you make sure you accept them, because he said you may not know them personally, but, they may know who you are. They may know who I am. And so I remember just having a ton of friends on Facebook, like, I don't know who they are, but I'm going to be nice and accept them. So.
And you just highlighted one of the perils of being a small business owner on Facebook. Can't deny friends with anyone. But I will say, I think one of the unique things that you guys do that I wanted to bring up regarding, Facebook. One of the things we always talk about in our industry is it's social media. It's supposed to be interactive. It's not supposed to be a place, for example, as a newspaper where you would post a news story and people would comment and you wouldn't respond to them. So in a lot of ways, Casey, that's true for you too, even whether you're posting to the Gazette page or to your personal profile. I mean, people are asking questions and you're responding. That's kind of the idea of social media. But one of the things that I love, that I know based on the responses that people love, is when you say, hey, it's first day of school, send me your first day of school pictures. Hey, send me your prom pictures. And it ends up on a photo gallery on the Gazette website. Maybe it's not the same as seeing it, that your picture in the paper. But for this generation, it has a lot of the same effect. And I know people love looking at those photos, and to be able to see just a ton of photos at once, but to see your picture among them is still got to be exciting for this generation.
We've had so many people tell us that, it made their day scrolling through the gallery and seeing not only their picture, but their friends' pictures. And people say they do that at their lunch break, or, when they're chilling at night and hanging out, they go through those pictures and it gives them some joy, especially in the last 2 years, Brennan, when it's been hard to find joy in the world. People are dying of coronavirus, and, you're rebuilding after the storm. So to have 3-4 minutes where you could just lose yourself looking at friendly pictures of dogs and, people at school and whatever it may be, we like doing that for people. It's small, but sometimes a small gesture could go a really long way. And as they say, a picture is, truly is 1,000 words. Every one of those pictures tells a story.
Our photo galleries are so popular. Yeah. And so I would say maybe it's been about 4 or 5 issues now. So what we're doing is we're pulling from photo galleries and we're putting them in print, so just because they still want to see their picture in print. I think we did a siblings day. We did a whole full page just with sibling pictures. And people were like, wait, it's in the print paper? I'm like, yeah, you got to go grab your print paper.
It's just, I guess it's refreshing. Even though you guys are a local newspaper, locally owned, it's refreshing to see a positive spin on the news. And like you said, Casey, things that it seems like it's getting fewer and fewer in the world, the things that can bring a smile to our face. We're dealing with so much, especially in our area. but to have our local newspaper be the one kind of sponsoring that positivity and focusing on that positivity is just a real godsend for us in this community, I think.
Well, thank you for that, and I agree. I think so. I think that people, if anyone needs to see the power of that, just look at how much response we get when we ask on social media for the pictures. We'll get hundreds of them, 200-300. Then when we throw them, to the scanner groups and everything like that, we get hundreds more there. So, it just goes to show that people want to be part of that, and they want to see themselves attached to that, that positivity that we're putting out there.
And it's easy to get wrapped up in the negativity. When I talk to people about social media and about policing yourself on social media all the time, and that's one of the things I talk about. Don't ever go negative. Like, that's what everybody's doing. You need to, if you want to stand out, be positive, because that's what we're lacking. And a positive post stands out so much more. People would never admit to it, but they tend to fall victim to the clickbait, and they want to see those negative headlines. But when you ask them what they would want to see, it's always the positive stuff.
I tell people anytime I'm asked to speak somewhere that one of the biggest misnomers out there is when the person stands up and says, man, y'all do way too much, negative stuff. Why are you always writing about this? Why you don't write about that? The reason why, and this isn't just us, this is media as a whole. The reason why is because statistics show that the thing that gets clicked on is that negative story. That's the reason why, that is the way that it is. So you're right. It's easy for someone to say, man, why don't y'all do this, this, and this? But you got to understand the business of it is, there has to be a strategy behind it. And it's because sometimes those more negative stories, or the juice, as we called it earlier, those are the things that sometimes get more clicks and attention, unfortunately.
It's the same thing in politics.
Yeah.
No one wants to admit it, and no one says they like the negative campaigning, but the statistics show that, unfortunately, that's what works. Let's talk about the future plans. You mentioned your daughter about to graduate in management. What does the future hold, I guess, the near future and the long-term future for the Gazette?
So we're going to keep that print paper going as long as we can. We're really still doing strong with that, which is great. We depend 100% on advertising. We're a free paper. We're a free website. I don't see it going away anytime soon, but we're just trying to come together and come up with some ideas to add more services, like whether it's managing a business's social media or just helping with event planning, things like that. So the website does great. Just that in itself, we average about 1 million views. I'm always amazed with that. I'm like, how can we get 1 million views? On every Monday when we do back in the day, just that averages 30,000 views. Wow. I'm like, 30,000 views. So, I'm just going to keep that print paper going as long as I can.
And so that's important for our listeners to understand is if we want to have the Lafourche Gazette continue in its current form, advertising is the key.
Yes.
Prior to digital newspapers, and that's what drove the newspaper. And you guys are keeping it old school, which I love, and I think everybody else loves. I think we all understand the idea of the click for pay and the paywalls that are out there with other newspapers, and especially the daily newspapers and what they have to do. But I feel like, keeping that Gazette pure and without that, it has been awesome. And it's obviously been successful for you guys. So if our listeners, especially the business community, is listening, that's how we keep it that way with the advertisement dollars. And
Boone's just instilled in me about shopping local. And it's the same thing. You want to have your advertising done, shop local with us. It's works both ways.
And look, we've had so many, and Addie could talk about this some too, is we've had so many businesses say that their ad has helped them. We talked about the distribution. Our papers are moving. Your ad's going to get seen, and it's going to help your business, and it's going to also help our business, so that in the future, if you're a business owner and, you want to get a story out there of your anniversary or whatever, and the Gazette's not there to report on it, you got to advertise with us to make sure that future sustainability is going to be there, and all the things that you guys like about what we do. That's based on our sales revenue.
I don't think people realize how affordable it is to advertise both print and digital.
Well, I did want to also comment, Casey, like I said in the beginning, I know a lot of people recognize your voice from the airwaves, ESPN New Orleans, KLEB for a lot of high school games, especially South Lafourche High School. How is it working in sort of multimedia? You've got radio, you've got the Gazette. How often are you pulling double duty, or is it constantly? How do you pull it off? Because I've been behind that microphone, and that's work enough.
One of the things that we always joke about is we record the radio broadcast of the Tarpon games, and people always tell me, man, what's that noise in the background? That's my camera clicking, because I'm taking pictures for the newspaper while calling the game. And then I had my broadcast partner, Taylor Griffin, for the Tarpon basketball games, says, man, how do you do that? It's like, well, I'm watching the game through the lens of the viewfinder, man. So it's hard, it's difficult. And there are some stressful times, but then I sit back and I realize, if I weren't in this field, I would be wanting to be behind the microphone. I would miss it so much if I didn't do it. So yeah, I'm one of those people. I like to be where it's happening. And Addie could tell you at 1, 2 a.m. I'm still up and editing pictures. I'm a night owl like that. So yeah, that's just the life that I like to live. It's a passion. It's a labor that I truly love. And one of the things that I think allows for that energy and that passion is that I truly do love what I do so much.
And what always impresses me is he'll be calling a game and taking pictures, and then he still has time to answer my text.
Yeah.
And I'll text him, I'm like, you can wait till the game's over, but if I don't text you now, I'll forget. And he still answers me during all of that. So
guys, that's pretty much all I had. Is there anything else that y'all wanted to talk about? Any other stories y'all wanted to bring up? Or
I would like to thank the people of Lafourche for investing in us and giving us the opportunity to be their local newspaper. Because whenever Addie and I were first having discussions in 2019. She showed me the web numbers, and I'm not going to go into specifics, but they're not even close to what they are now. So we know for sure our audience has grown, and people gave us a chance, and I think we've taken advantage of that. So I just want to thank them for being open-minded enough to allow us to be their news source during COVID and during Ida, and hopefully beyond. We hope that the large audience that we've built is going to be sustainable and that we're going to keep doing a great job for everybody.
I'm just thankful for the community that just took their time after when I first started to meet with me. I mean, I had some really big shoes to fill, which, I think the whole office still can't fill those shoes we lost. But they were all welcoming and so supportive and supported me for the next chapter in my life. So I appreciate that.
Can I tell a story real quick?
Sure.
So, all right, the first time that I met Addie, I'm going to embarrass you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We were talking about multitasking and doing radio work and everything, right? I'm calling a game at Central Lafourche. I don't remember the year. But, I don't know if anybody has ever been in the Central Lafourche gym for a basketball game. There's no phone service at all. You're not going to be able to use your phone. It's gotten a little better, but back in those days, it was awful. And we were doing the game via cell phone. It was South Lafourche versus Ellender girls basketball. It was a district playoff game. And I'm trying to hook up the radio equipment. Nothing is working. And I'm stressed out. And then Addie comes up to me, hey, I want to introduce myself. And I basically gave you the culture. I was like, not now, lady. I don't have the time. And then lo and behold, later on, that ends up becoming my boss and the single best boss that anyone could ever have. So thank you so much for not thinking that I was a jerk after the first time that we met.
And it took so much courage. I'm like, I really need to go introduce myself to this guy. I write him a check every once in a while because he would just do freelance writing for us. And he just totally blew me off.
Yes, I did. That is a true story.
Oh man, that's fantastic. I have so many memories of people try to come and talk when you're trying to, especially the basketball games, because you're usually right there courtside.
Yeah.
And people they can see you with a headset on, I'm trying to work here. Well, I tell you what, it's time for our rapid fire round. I know Addie is super excited about this. So here's the deal. You can give us a one-word answer, or you can expand on the answer. We just want to hear the first thing that comes to your mind on these questions. So we'll start on each of these. We'll start with Addie and go to Casey. So the first one is, what's your go-to order at a Down the Bayou restaurant?
Oh, that's easy. Hamburger steak at the Double D. And I'm so disappointed that waiter isn't around no more. And I live in La Rose, and it was just the best thing when the hamburger steak could get delivered to my house. I need waiter to come back.
That was my parents' favorite. Maybe it's a Delta form thing.
Yeah.
Maybe so.
That was my parents'
My
favorite.
favorite.
Go-to.
Mimo's fried chicken salad. Mimo's my nanny. Love you, nanny, if you listen. And Mimo's fried chicken salad, the best.
Oh, wow. I have to try that one. What is your favorite Cajun word or phrase and its meaning?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I'll let Casey go.
Oh, bruh.
I think maybe pomade, because like we always say that word. And for a while, when my daughters were younger, they wanted to. They got a dog, and they wanted it to be a French word, and because we would always say pomade. Boo wanted to name the dog Pomade, but the dog ended up getting named Booey. So, but yeah, that's yeah.
Another good Cajun word.
Yes.
Yes.
Favorite snowball flavor?
Oh, strawberry with condensed milk from Missy Lane's.
Coconut, because I'm a messy eater, got the beard, can't be having any stains in the beard,
Well, first of all, we've had numerous people this season give a shout out to Missy Lane's, and everybody's favorite seems to be coconut.
Really? I thought I would have been the outlier there.
No,
Okay.
man.
That's like my
I feel like
second
every
favorite.
show somebody comes up with
Wow.
coconut. Or coconut with condensed milk has been another one. So next hurricane, staying or evacuating?
Staying on the houseboat.
That fortress of iron on Bayou Lafourche.
I will not be staying on the houseboat.
This was an easy one for both of you.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, this is the hot topic right now on social media, especially between a couple of local celebrities. Jambalaya or pastalaya?
Jambalaya. I've never been a fan of pastalaya.
Wow. See, I'll take either one, but a jambalaya. Yeah, jambalaya is the better of the two.
All right. Well, thank you, Addie, Casey. Thank y'all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And thanks for sharing the history and current status and what's to come on the Lafourche Gazette. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
That'll do it for this episode of the DTB Podcast. Thanks to our producer, Ross Jambon, our executive producers, Jure Gyro and Hillary Crum, and the rest of the Bless Your Heart nonprofit board members, Luke Newman and Chris Brantley. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the DTB Podcast on Facebook, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also get more content by following us on Twitter and TikTok at the DTB Podcast. I'm Brennan Mathern. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.